Before I take it to the quilt, I'm going to take one end of this binding and I'm going to fold it back on itself to create a miter. So it's going to create that 45-degree angle that I'm going to be looking for later when I join my ends. So this is a 90-degree angle here. You can see a 90-degree angle here, and this is a 45-degree angle. So I've already done the other end, so I'll show you how nice and crisp that angle is. This is a perfect 90 degrees, and this is a perfect 45 right there. So I have this open edge of the binding right along the trimmed edge of my quilt. I'm going to leave this free for now, and I'm going to give myself about 6 inches to play with here. So I like to put a red-headed pin here so I know that that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with a back stitch here. I can take this pin out now. I think I need one more stitch here, and then I'll back up. Okay, here's the good part. I'm going to flatten this out so it's right where I want it. I'm not pulling it too tight. And I'm going to open this up just for a second so I can see where that angled line is. And I'm going to stick a pin just inside that miter. That's going to be my miter. And that pin is just holding this bottom layer to the quilt. Now I'm going to fold that back in, tuck that all in. Now I'm going to bring this tail down. Again, I'm not pulling it, I'm just laying it in place. And I'm going to lay it right on top of where I started. Now this is the tricky part, and this is the only tricky part. I'm going to reach inside here without moving this. I'm going to reach in, grab the middle 2 layers. So right now I have this folded in half, so these 2 layers, and I have this bottom one folded in half, and I've got 2 layers down there. So I want the middle 2 layers. I'm going to pinch those right there. I'm going to grab this pin. I don't need it there anymore. I need it here. And I pinned those middle 2 layers together. So let me zoom in on that so you can see that. So let me put this back where it was so you can see that again. So here's my bottom layer of where I started. This is the starting end. And that bottom layer is pinned to the quilt. This is folded back on itself. This is now the end of the binding is coming forward on top of where I started. Now I want the middle 2 layers, so I peel back the top layer, I grab this one and this one, leave that one there. So I've got the middle 2 layers, and I'll grab a second pin this time, just so I can leave that one there for a minute. And I pinned those together, okay? So now when I take that pin out, I can lift this up. And you just have to manipulate your quilt top a little bit so that you can line this up. And everything should fit snugly. So what I have here, I'm going to stick another pin here so you can see that there was a fold here that matches up with this fold here. this 45-degree angle matches up with this corner. So there's a 90-degree angle here, and that 45 comes right out through that corner, right there. And then I have got a fold here, and that fits snugly with this fold here. And I've got another corner here where this 45 meets up and comes right out through that corner. So I could move this pin a little bit. I'm going to put that pin there. And now I'm going to sew along that 45-degree angle. So move that tail out of the way. Fold this quilt up on itself so I can get this under the machine. Okay, so now before I trim away this extra binding, I can check and make sure that everything fits properly, and it does. So I can trim away this extra seam allowance. And I'm going to finger press this seam allowance open, which is easy to do since this was pretty heavily starched. It will stay wherever I tell it. Now I line this edge up with the edge of the quilt, and I'll put one pin in here where that miter is, just to hold that in place. And now I can finish sewing this last seam. And that's that. I was able to do that join without any measuring, without any fancy tools. All it took was pre-folding the leading end of the binding before I ever started, gave it a nice crease, a nice press, and that's that. So I'm going to take this to the ironing board now and get everything pressed and ready for the final stitching. So I will press all of this binding away from the top of the quilt first. Then I'll bring it around to the back and give it a nice press on the back. And then I'm going to trim away all these extra threads. And then once I have those 2 times around that I've finished pressing, then I'm going to run a little bead of liquid Elmer's school glue right along this seam line, and then press that down and heat set it to dry the glue, and then I'll come back and stitch from the front.